How do you define emotion? What are the prerequisites for attachment? What does it mean to be human? This is the story of Altina Orion. When the sacrifice is made and the ancient blood flows, the path to the Graal of Erebos shall open. When the tainted holy beast is pierced by the blade of World's End, and its blood fills the Graal, the great twilight shall fall upon the land. Deep in the northwestern mountains of Erebonia, the descendants of the kin of Earth, the gnomes, worked feverishly to appease their master in isolation from the world. This hunger to please was most prominent in the chief himself, Black Alberic, who throughout history gathered various technologies and data to feed into a certain experiment. A tool that would bring about a preordained calamity. Within this black workshop, many attempts were made with an equal amount of failures, but on the 74th try, the gnomes finally succeeded in their endeavour, creating a being that supposedly fit the requirements. This homunculus was eventually awoken in 1204 of the Septian calendar, and immediately loaned to a beneficiary to test it in the field. However, before it was dispatched, its memories of the workshop were erased, leaving it with only its model number and name to mind. Stepping outside for the first time and synchronizing with her combat shell Clam Saleus, this was the birth of OZ-74, Altina Orion. While many newborns are fortunate to be born into periods of relative peace, Altina was not so lucky. She was exposed to a period of tumult, a civil war in the land of Erebonia between the nobles and imperial faction where she would play a role in its eventual outcome. Loaned to the Noble Alliance and more specifically Rufus Alborea, eldest son of the Alborea dukedom, Altina was regularly sent out on missions that she would often complete with inhuman efficiency. Never questioning, never doubting, just doing. However, though she didn't realise it yet, a particularly fateful encounter took her to the far northern territory of Emir, where she was tasked with kidnapping Princess Alfin and her close friend Elise from the care of the Schwarzer barony. It was here that she caught a glimpse of someone who would be a notable catalyst for her eventual change, a person with whom she would soon work with frequently around Zemuria, the awakener of the Ashen Knight and adopted son of the Baron of Emir, Reen Schwarzer. And it wasn't just Reen who Altina would encounter during her time in the war. She also confronts other members of the so-called Class VII, a third faction who sought to find another way to end the hostilities. Most notably within this group, she is perplexed by a girl who appears to be the same age as her, a child that commanded a combat shell much like her own. Though if Altina had any sort of curiosity regarding this event, she hides it well below the surface, for she is not there to think, she is there to obey. As the war reaches its climax and the Vermilion apocalypse is once again thwarted, it appears that the Noble Alliance has snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Duke Cayenne finds his plan in ruins and implores Rufus to assist him in his time of need. And naturally, Altina would follow the lead of her superior. Though, if Cayenne was hoping these actions would benefit him, he was sorely mistaken. Swooping in from above, Altina apprehends the crazed Duke, finally revealing the true motive of Rufus and his position in the Noble Alliance. Not to assist it, but to destroy it from within. And Cayenne is left even more incredulous when the true mastermind takes the stage soon after. A Chancellor with ruthless ideals, a will of iron, and the man who Altina would serve from here on. With the Noble Alliance crushed, Osborne had orchestrated a scenario whereby his own plan could now proceed unhindered. And with his faithful Ironbloods by his side, including the aid of the Black Workshop, he could finally move to the next phase. With the situation in Erebonia settled, the Imperial government looked to their next conquest, in particular the annexation of the nearby province of Crossbell, which had dared to declare an illegitimate independence. However, with their means of defence seemingly gone, the Erebonian Empire swiftly moved in to capitalise on the confusion, and consolidated this advance with their own weapon. A hero of the Imperial faction and pilot of the legendary Ashen Knight that brought about the end of the war, the famed Ashen Chevalier. However, he was not alone, as Altina was also tasked by the Imperial faction to assist him on his missions, in particular supporting him in quelling any would-be rebels attempting to resist Erebonia's rule. When the situation was finally under control in March 1205 of the Septian calendar, it wouldn't be long till she would be dispatched once again to a land ravaged by poverty. During the Civil War, the Northern Jaegers of Northumbria, who were enlisted by the now disgraced Duke Alberea, had committed an atrocity on a small town in the Croatan province. The town in question, Keldic, had been burned down by order of the Duke, who was vying for a power play of his own during the campaign. And the Northern Jaegers had no issue carrying out this task for the pay they received. Using this as leverage, the Imperial government demanded reparations from Northumbria in June, and though the Northumbrian Diet admitted the inhumane nature of what had happened to the townspeople, they simply could not afford the reparations. However, while the Diet stammered, the proud Northern Jaegers took it upon themselves to answer on behalf of the independent state, taking over the parliamentary building and flatly refusing the reparations. Outraged, the Imperial government turned to former Noble Alliance commanders Aurelia Le Guin and Wallace Bardius with a compromise: suppress Northumbria and be rewarded with more favourable terms for their defeated provincial armies. After 2 months of preparations, the Lemaire and Sutherland armies, along with the Intelligence Division and RMP, marched upon the capital of Haliask, where a fierce resistance was fronted by the Jaegers. Though the battle itself was already won, their pride would not allow them to give up. But Le Guin was not content to simply sit back, and gave them a grace period to surrender. Realising the severity of the situation, the Le Mans Bracer Guild sends over some high-ranking bracers to minimise civilian casualties, and Erebonia once again call upon the Ashen Chevalier along with Altina to secure the situation. Though their efforts do have a positive impact, the grace period afforded by Le Guin eventually passes, and the archaisms utilised by the Jaegers attack without mercy. It was at this time that Altina caught a true glimpse of Reen's power, something that he had depended upon during the Civil War and on various missions. But in this particular moment, it became clear to her that this power was not something that should be used lightly, as it seemed to engulf and consume the man. For the first time, Altina experienced genuine concern for someone, a spark of desire to protect. And though she couldn't understand this feeling, it would soon follow her to arguably her most difficult undertaking yet. About 5 months later in 1206 of the Septian calendar, Altina joins the newly created Fours Branch campus in Leaves. Once again, she is sent in order to assist Reen, who had chosen to become an instructor after graduating, though it's more fitting to say her true purpose was to monitor the man. And though Altina herself looked visibly younger in the traditional sense for a typical Fours student, it's fair to say that she is able to play the role better than others. And playing a role was exactly what Altina was required to do here, as she becomes a full-fledged member of Fours, partaking in classes, going on field studies, joining clubs, and making friends. Though this would come naturally to any other person who had grown with the liberties of choice and familial attachment, for Altina this was alien territory made all too apparent by even her early days in the academy. Whereas before she was simply required to do assignments and execute them with no questions asked, she was now being told to choose what she wanted to do, to express her emotion through mediums like music and painting. And that begs the question, how can you show something that you never even knew existed? But it's not just her own individual struggles that are apparent, as Altina is also enlisted in new Class VII Special Operations, with Reen as her tutor and classmates by her side. With the likes of Yuna, Kurt, and later Muse and Ash, Altina initially struggles with this group of varying personalities. Whereas they display a wide array of emotion and are able to embellish their opinions, Altina by contrast is noticeably more blunt and lacking in decorum. But of course, this is all she knows. And it's possible that in certain crowds, it would be enough to alienate those around her. Even so, if this was ever a problem, the students of Fours kept it well hidden from Altina. As the academic year progresses, Altina finds herself slowly growing attached to those around her, partaking in sleepovers and other leisurely activities. She begins to understand the idea of family with the sporadic visits of her sister Miriam Orion, who she initially met during the Civil War, and though at first Altina sees these visits as a nuisance, she slowly starts to acknowledge the sibling bond between them. Not only that, but she also finds herself expressing empathy for those who have lost their homeland, a land that she herself contributed in taking. Over time, these feelings start to manifest more noticeably and frequently, and as the new Class 7 grows through their time together, it is most notably reflected in the behaviour and mannerisms of Altina. These were times that she would never forget, but unfortunately, her world would soon collapse. As part of their curriculum, 4 students are required to learn about soul darts, and in particular how to pilot them. Though this is largely not a problem for her classmates, Altina finds the logistics difficult to grasp as she attempts to control them in the same way she does Clam Soleus. As a result, she simply accepts that she cannot pilot one, and resorts to supporting from the sidelines. That is, until a certain day where a more unusual soul dart is loaned to the campus. Unlike the more mobile Kestrel or Draken models, this particular type, the Goliath Noah, was far more bulky in design. Though its movement was severely limited, its power was unrivaled among the different classes of soul dart. But it came with a more notable price. It was strikingly difficult to pilot. That is, except for Altina herself. Finding the control method similar to how she controlled her own combat shell, Altina is able to freely test out the Goliath Noah, and all seems well for a time. In a sudden twist of fortune, she appears to lose consciousness as if in a trance and attacks even her own classmates. Though they are able to free her from a stupor, this moment would be the trigger for the gnomes to enact the final phase of their plan. Altina was all too aware that she was not a normal human. She was a puppet of sorts, something that was given life in a laboratory rather than through conventional means. And in a cruel twist of fate, it was also her destiny to become a weapon that would bring about the end of the world. As the members of Class 7 save the capital of Heimdall from an ancient evil and celebrations are held in Valflame Palace, the gears of fate begin to stir. A seed of malice finally blooms, leading to the attempted assassination of Emperor Eugene III. The royal blood thus was spilt, and the final stage was now at hand, an event that would require Altina to mobilise along with all the other Ironbloods. And though Altina was duty-bound to accept her orders as always, her desire to leave is more out of a concern for her classmate who had committed the crime. However, Altina could never have realised that these summons were because she would be the key to bring forth the Great Twilight. OZ-74, the 74th attempt in creating a weapon that could slay a holy beast. The 74th attempt at creating the Originator Zero, the Blade of World's End. A sword that could only be created from the raw matter that comprised a being that was both human and weapon. Altina was the magnum opus of that work, and she is taken to the depths of the Graal where her destiny appears to be sealed. Though, that might have been the case, if she had not grown to be a cherished member of Class 7, someone that others want to protect. Fighting through insurmountable odds, new Class 7 finally make it to the bottom of the Graal to confront Black Olberic and Gileath Osborne, where the true nature of this ritual is laid bare to them, the most striking detail of which is that Altina was to be their sacrifice. However, before any more action can be taken, the tainted holy beast awakens, and wastes no time in its assault. Though Class 7 are able to hold their own for a time with the assistance of the Ashen Knight, they are soon overwhelmed by the power of the beast, and with the situation dire, the final event is soon to be enacted, the moment where Altina would assimilate into the Originator Zero. It's surprising though that, with death so close, Altina finds that she is happy to sacrifice herself for those that she has come to care about, for those that she has grown attached to. Her desire to protect them is not an unknown phenomenon anymore. These were real and genuine emotions that she could comprehend for herself. She wasn't doing this out of obligation, she was doing this because she wanted to. And it's that desire that compels her to defend Reen, the person who was arguably the most influential in allowing her to realise this. But Altina would quickly realise in this moment that an inclination to protect those that are precious to you is not one-sided. The events of the Graal end in a haze, and Altina along with Yuna, Kurt and the original Class VII escape to Eren Village. It doesn't take Altina long to comprehend what has just happened, that the people she wanted to sacrifice her life for had instead done so for her. It's a moment of despair for a person who up till this point has never experienced the pain of losing something precious, or the yearning to claim it back. And this rekindling of resolve spurs Altina on. With the other members of Class 7, Altina pushes back at this cruel destiny, this preordained fate. Though hope may seemingly be lost and the end of the world draws ever nearer, she chooses to fight, and confronts her past by infiltrating the Black Workshop along with the other members of Class 7, thus saving Reen and Millium, who had since transformed into the Originator Zero in her stead. With everyone together and their bond stronger than ever, she, along with the other heroes of Zemuria, are able to bring forth a miracle. An instance that, by all means, should never have happened. But that outcome, in of itself, was greatly influenced by the progress that Altina made during her time at Fours, and the friendships she will continue to hold during her life. She is no longer a puppet that exists to serve, she is now an individual with her own desires and ambitions.